Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Wita Srikati. I am from the Fakultas of Teknik Informatika. My major is Informasi Sistem. This is my class and this is my student ID. In part 1, I would like to share my views on the lectures at Bina Sarana Informatika University, who have guided me this first semester. Each lecturer has a unique teaching style. Some lecturers deliver material at a fairly fast pace, making it difficult for me to focus, to follow, and understand their explanation. Other lecturers, some that students help master the basics, even though most students are still struggling to grasp the concept being taught. On the other hand, some lecturers have a very engaging and interactive teaching style. For example, they frequently ask random questions to answer students understand. For online lectures, some lecturers rarely hold Zoom sessions, even though the schedule is set, and sometimes these meetings don't take place without clear notice. Furthermore, I have also experienced that some lecturers are difficult to contact via private message, so my question or requests haven't been responded to yet. Those are my thoughts on my learning experience with these lectures this semester. From this different teaching style, I've learned to adapt better and continue to strive to understand the material well. For to explain about the question words. Nearly all question words in English start with the same two letters we have. That's why questions with question word are also called the we have question. Purpose: we have question as for specific response as to the time, place, reason, thing, or person. Who asks question about people? What? Ask question about things or object. When? Ask question about time. Where? Ask a question about place. Why? Ask a question about reason. How? Ask about manner or condition. As we ask the question when we want to get specific or more information. They are different than yes or no question. We have the next question words: who, what, where, which, why, how, what time, whose, when. Who? We ask who when we want to ask about people. For example, who is that? My friend Lisa. What? We ask what when we want to ask about things, animal, and action. For example, what is your favorite sport? It's golf. Where? We ask where when we want to ask about place. For example, where are you from? I'm from Indonesia. When? We ask when we want to ask about time, occasion, or moment. For example, when do you relax? At the weekend. What time? We ask what time when we want to ask about time hours. For example, what time do you finish work? At 4:30. Which? We ask which when we want to ask about choice or preference. For example, which is your apple? The red one. Why? We ask why when we want to ask about reason. For example, why are you studying English? Because I want to improve my skill. When we answer a question with a why, we start with because. Whose, we ask whose when we want to ask about ownership or possession. For example, whose are these books? They are mine. How, we ask how when we want to ask about the way in which something happens. For example, how are things at work? Boring as usual. Question word. What? Asking for information about something. Asking for repetition or confirmation. For example, what is your name? What, I can hear you. You did what? Question word. What for? Asking for a reason, asking why. For example, why did you do that for? Question word. When? Asking about time. For example, when did he leave? Question word. Where? Asking in or at what place or position. For example, where do they live? Which? Asking about quiz. Which? For example, which color do you want? Who? Asking what or which person or people. Subject. For example, who opened the door? Question word. Whom? Asking what or which person or people. Object. For example, whom did you see? Whom? Whose? Asking about ownership. For example, whose are these keys? Whose turn is it? Why? Asking for reason. Asking what? For. For example, why do you say that? Question word. Why don't? Making a suggestion. For example, why don't I help you? Question word. How? Asking about manner. Asking about condition or quality. How does this work? How must your how? With how there are a number of other experiences that are used in question. How old? How much? How many? How often? How far? How old? We ask how old when we want to ask about a case. For example, how old are they? 24. How much money? We ask how much money when we want to ask about number, quantity, or price. For example, how much milk do you drink? I drink only on class. How often? We ask how often when we want to ask about frequency. For example, how often does she study? She studies every day. How far? We ask how far when we want to ask about distance. For example, how far is it to campus here? It's 10 kilometers to campus. Well, that's all my explanation for 2. Thank you.